Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Line Rider watch history. For those who are watching this upon release, you may be surprised that this video is coming out so soon after the last one. Yeah, that last one was quite the undertaking to complete. When I guest reviewed for Rabbit Squirrel's monthly roundup series back in April of 2021, other guest reviewers like Ava Hoffman were writing comprehensive essays while I was writing short paragraphs. This made me feel some hardcore imposter syndrome, which led me to compensate way too much. Tiny issues slipped by last time that wouldn't have slipped by in a shorter, more focused project, plus 40-minute videos are entirely unsustainable for a monthly series. So apologies for the drastic change in approach, but this is still a new series, so bear with me. Here's my new guidelines for these videos. For each track in this video, I will point out 3 different things that stood out to me. Afterwards, on the contingency of not being able to cover this with my 3 points, I will share the value I derived from each given track. This is so I can embody the spirit of why I made this series to begin with. Furthermore, after observing my first Line Rider watch history, I will set a personal limit of around 500 words for each review, unless the track has a certain point that requires a lot of context and explanation. For example, think back to the My Pal Footfoot review from last month where I talked about that track's relation to the Shags. If I have a point like that, I will break the word limit to properly elaborate. Otherwise, I'm gonna try my best to keep the series short, sweet, and focused. On that note, let's begin.
Content warning.
Yeah, that's about all I have to show for you to get the general gist of this track. Chuggers' newest release, One-Eyed Giant 2, continues to build off its brand of heavy post-production in Line Rider, and just like its previous release, Yahoo, it greatly toes the line between shitpost and art. For starters, Chuggers' editing style makes this track, specifically its mastery of green screen effects in Line Rider, or more accurately, blue screen effects. Yeah, as someone who's tried green screen effects in Line Rider before, I asked Chuggers how he made it so that the green screen didn't look fucking horrible. Let's just say I'm taking notes. This gives us a hilarious counterpiece for One-Eyed Giant, one of the first tracks in Line Rider to really utilize post-production in a way that added to the experience. One-Eyed Giant is endearingly funny and charming, but this track doesn't give a fuck about that and will throw any idea out there to contrast with the original. Data moshing, animation, blatant cuts, text on screen. I mean, this is Line Rider now. All of these tools have been used in other tracks, especially mine, and yet it's simultaneously hilarious to see these recontextualize a track from 2007. It's also kind of impressive in terms of how far Line Rider has come. It's great. However, this track does have a major problem with some of its jokes painting black culture as a punchline. References to Supreme and the Dougie with JPEG Mafia playing in the background, all presented to us as if they're funny because they're there, or at least that's how it can come across to some people, has the potential to be a bit problematic. To be fair, I think I understand the song choice, as Bosch being bald has been a meme in the Line Rider Discord server for a while now, but as far as other references go, I can't say I have anything. Those seem to me like a byproduct of how wider internet spaces treat black culture as a whole, especially when it comes to meme culture, which is referenced in Chuggers' track through more ways than one. I should make it very clear that Chuggers had no ill intentions with these jokes, and I'm not black, so I recommend listening to black voices about this subject and come to your own conclusions there. But I still find this all important to highlight for obvious reasons. I say if you're able to look past these jokes, this track has some pretty funny meta humor, but if you can't, I don't blame you. Either way, there's still merit to be found here, both comedy-wise and artistically, and I'm hoping this merit can transfer to better tracks from Chuggers in the future.
Content warning.
No need to panic, Ava doesn't have 3 tracks on here like last time. She was only able to make 2 this month! Making Mirrors is a short track but offers yet another approach to adding color in Line Rider. The track starts off with these colors that blend in with each other. Not invisible, not really easy to see. However, as the track goes on, the colors get bolder, more visible, until the entire background becomes bold at the end and, in some ways, Bosch becomes visible to himself. It's a quaint and abstract depiction of self-discovery. Or at least that's what I would say if it wasn't for the fact that the character from My Pal Footfoot makes a reappearance here. For those who remember My Pal Footfoot, you may remember its commentary on the vicious cycle that occurs throughout generations of abuse. So seeing its character make a reappearance in this track about reflection and identity has got this track hitting differently for me. Looking back at my own experiences with parental abuse, this statement represents part of how I was able to overcome it, looking deep inside of myself and always questioning whether I was doing the right thing, and accepting that there are plenty of times where I've hurt people for wrong reasons, even if it gets infuriating when people who have hurt you don't come to said same realization. Breaking the cycle is all about being your best self instead of settling for your shitty self, so seeing Ava recognize this by connecting Making Mirrors' base themes to an otherwise radically different experience, it's beautiful. Reminds me a lot of my own fucking track where a silhouette once walked. Don't worry, if someone makes another track about abuse, I'll be like, wow, this reminds me a lot of my pal Footfoot. All jokes aside, I love it. Something else interesting this track does that has been touched upon in the past but is only now being explored in more depth is the use of layer automation to hide and reveal crucial narrative beats located at recycled areas of the track. Recycling is a Line Rider technique I've always had a soft spot for, and seeing it being used in a more artistic way is something I'd kill to see more of in the future. I may even experiment with it myself. It's yet another example of Ava's non-stop experimentation being displayed to great effect, and also another example of how Line Rider is rapidly changing as we speak. I can barely keep up with it. Please help. But yeah, I'm anticipating this track to inform the vision of another one, so in conclusion, subscribe to Ava Hoffman. Believe it or not, Ava Hoffman did not have the most prolific 2021. This guy did. Crazy Game Master's tracks have often been described as reminiscent of a Line Rider content farm, but I consider that an unfair way to view his catalog, especially when it comes to this track. One thing I've always found striking about Crazy Game Master's output is his various different stylings and how he applies each one on a case-by-case basis. He has tracks where he explores certain motifs and settings, like in Boss Bullet Hell Monday, or Space Invaders, or Cradles. Wait, what? He has tracks like Oh Fly On and Mope Mope, which are complete non-sequiturs in context with the rest of his work. And then he has tracks like Idols and Sounds a Little Something Like, which rely almost solely on visual effects to sync to electronic music. Robot Language falls under that final style, and it probably blows everything else he made similar to it out of the water. What makes this track stand out are how memorable the visual effects are. This is most likely because of it being the most Geometry Dash inspired Line Rider track to date, taking not only visual motifs from the game, but also animations that resemble its aesthetics as well. Of course, you also have motifs taken from Andrew Hess's work. That's a Crazy Game Master staple, but it's not like Idols where that inspiration accounts for the bulk of the track. There's a lot of variety here. I also noticed how good Crazy Game Master has gotten at transitioning between two different parts of the track. This is prevalent after the breakdown, in which Bosch slows down until he's at the same speed and style of movement present in the beginning, perfectly synced to when the music starts reflecting said part. There are also distinct motifs in slower sections as well, such as flings that are under smooth curving lines, being unlike anything I've seen from anyone else. This begs the question, is this the beginning of Crazy Game Master establishing a stylistic vocabulary entirely of his own? I don't know, but all I'll say is that it's always a blast to review his stuff in the end. He constantly keeps making his new best track yet, and on that note, this is Crazy Game Master's new best track yet. I look forward to him topping it. Eventually. I never watched Big City Greens. It always looked fucking lame to me. You've got these character designs that look like the minions' aborted children, and then you've got this guy who looks like Erwin from Billy and Mandy. And like, what's the show even about? Is it just another Craig of a Creek? Who gives a fuck about Craig of a Creek? That show sucked harder than We Baby Bears. Who gives a fuck about We Baby Bears? Can you tell I don't watch a lot of modern cartoons? The Owl House! More like the owl never watched this show ever. Got him! Oh wait, I'm not here to talk about Big City Greens. I'm here to talk about Big City Greens, X Line Rider. This Disney commissioned track, created by Rabbit Squirrel, Conundrumer, and Doodle Chaos, is part of a series of Line Rider tracks celebrating original cartoons by Disney. Because of how painfully capitalist this entire concept is, I can't say there's much of an artistic statement being said here outside of consume! That doesn't mean this track has no value though. I find a lot of these commissioned tracks to often be good opportunities to start experimenting with existing mods while introducing new ones, as shown here with the introduction of custom skins and skeletons. Well, technically that was introduced in the Gravity Falls Line Rider track, but the Gravity Falls Line Rider track didn't have a character fall off their sled now, did it? Ha! Innovation. I just need an excuse to talk about this. Being able to change the rider's appearance and how they interact with the physics, if this were to become more accessible to the public, would be a game changer for Line Rider. It would be the ultimate shift away from the boy on a sled connotations that Line Rider evokes, the very thought of which Conundrumer has lamented in the past, and it would be a drastic reconsideration of what makes movement so important in the track. Like, imagine not even having a sled be shown, and just having a visual asset of a character standing up as they slide across something made in Line Rider. Wouldn't that be insane? Okay, fine, I'll stop with the theorizing and talk a bit about the actual track. I like the use of scenery here. I'm pretty sure it's referencing some set pieces in the show, but it does so in a way that also celebrates Line Rider, taking artistic inspiration from tracks like Ribs and Where the Grass is Green. It also, of course, highlights Doodle Chaos's recognizable iconography here and there. Oh, and that ending of using tiny invisible lines to manage the individual speed of the riders? I am personally a fan of that. I feel like this track is an overall solid execution of equally showcasing Big City Greens and Line Rider as a whole. Still, I do wish more new features were added for the sake of improving Line Rider as an artistic medium and not for the sake of monetary incentive. As far as I know, playback speed toggling is the only feature like this. But I guess living in a capitalist society do be like that. Oh well. In the end, I'll always give kudos to these track makers. They deserve the recognition. I can't believe nobody has ever thought of making this track before now. Bosch does the cha-cha slide. That's the entire track. This is the peak of Line Rider. It's been 6 years since Conundrum released Ragdoll, arguably the first track to really get Line Rider back into the conversation of broader online spheres, but I can't say I've seen much like it since then. Cha-Cha Slide is the rare exception to this rule, and with all due respect, I'd say it even improves upon Ragdoll in certain areas. Whereas Ragdoll made Bosch doing dance moves that at times weren't a direct depiction of anything familiar, Cha-Cha Slide is based off of something that I'm pretty sure everyone who's been to a wedding or middle school dance this past decade has participated in at least once, further closing the gap between audience perspective and artistic intent in a way that's hilarious and fascinating to watch. With pretty much every passing second, this track is outdoing itself with creative interpretations of a dance instruction, manipulating Bosch's feet to give off the effect of stomping, or constantly separating hand contacts to give off the effect of clapping are good instances of this. But this track doesn't stop at movement alone to illustrate the song. For one, a lot of this track's movement is determined by invisible lines, highlighting Bosch and not the track. For another thing, camera tricks are used to display a sense of space and action. This is not only for the sake of following given directions, but also for the sake of creating an exciting mood. A lot like how Happy Spring did so actually. All of this, in tandem with other ideas like drawing Charlie Brown, the cartoon character, when the singer demands you to do the titular dance, adds up to a charming video that has me grinning from ear to ear all the way through. Of course, the movement might not be the most refined in some areas. 10-point cannons might have helped with the hopping parts, but that's minor. This track still uses Line Rider limitations as a strength to bolster novelty value while also being more accessible to those outside of the community. I don't know if this will get 400,000 views or anything, but it has my support. Peace! Peace! Now do the Cupid Shuffle. OTDE released a track after Little Deer called Hold Your Breath. I mentioned it in the conclusion of last month's watch history as tracks I weren't able to get to, but I'll do my mini review of it right now. Hold Your Breath is perhaps one of the greatest demonstrations of quirk matching to music I've ever seen, not just because of its particular accuracy, but also because of how quirk is a great spiritual portrayal of jazz as a genre. So I'm very pleased to announce that OTDE has not only recognized these positives, but developed them to make a track that's not only 10 times longer, but 10 times better with Bring Down the House. In the same vein as a saxophone player using different playing techniques to feel the music as it goes, OTDE uses different quirk techniques to feel where their track will go. Alternating hand flings, recycles, gigaquirk, and so on and so forth are used to express more soul to the viewer and less to be extremely try-hard and show-offy. Hold Your Breath also did this, but there was really only one section worth highlighting there, and the track feels more like a build-up to that highlight. Bring Down the House, on the other hand, is much more loose and much more unpredictable, while also feeling much more complete as well. That's not an easy feat to pull off, but OTDE did it and then some. I adore these written notes scrawled throughout the track. Anyone who's read or written musical notation before is familiar with all the notes that go with it, advising on musical intention, how to play a certain part, which parts are more strict to follow and which allow for more experimentation, etc., especially if you're a jazz musician. So seeing a mock version of that idea translated to a different genre and a different medium is incredible. It not only allows for the spirit of jazz to show through more, but also for more of the thought process that goes behind making quirk to show through as well. Furthermore, it gets me fucking hyped. You would not believe how ecstatic I was when the title drop appeared. It all feels like a sign of the evolution of quirk and how more diverse it's getting in style, atmosphere, and technique. Like, everything here is just so much more, and yet, I still want more! Therefore, to anyone who's interested in quirk, take notes from stuff like Bring Down the House and Frequency Hotline. I think 2022 could serve as an exciting year for Line Rider in many more ways than one. Here's hoping.
So I guess this is goodbye!
No, it's not. We've still got 2 more tracks to talk about after this. Idiot! Anyways, this track had quite the interesting making of process. The movement was commissioned by Ava Hoffman to Rabbit Squirrel, who released it on their second channel as part of their Patreon-fueled monthly output. As always, Rabbit Squirrel's movement is impeccably evocative, what with their implementation of Bezier curves and remounting physics, emphasizing the exact right parts of a song at the exact right times. Considering this, it's no wonder Ava decided to say, fuck that, let's add some color. And yes, it's great. It reminds me a lot of how classic Manuquark tracks used to get scened by creators and collaborators, but instead of trying to repurpose Rabbit's track into a tangible environment, Ava is able to cleanly add psychedelic imagery on top of it, in large part thanks to the colors feature. Maybe this is a sign of things to come for a bygone Line Rider trope. No matter what, I love the psychedelic imagery from My Boy returning here. The more tracks there are like My Boy, the better. And this track really lets the imagery act as music visualization of its own, justifying its existence as something outside of symbolic aesthetics, though this might mess with YouTube's compression sometimes. Still, I wouldn't undervalue this choice. If you look at the description, you'll notice that this is the third in a trilogy revolving around colors, with the remake of Lipstick Stains and Making Mirrors being previous installments. I find this detail captivating. Although I don't think these tracks have any narrative connection amongst each other, if anything their themes couldn't be any more different, they all share a common goal of producing unique iterations of tried and true concepts through certain techniques that put forward their own flair and advantages, in this case color. Honestly, what an original idea! Other track makers have done albums of tracks before, such as the Fun series, but never with this kind of vision. I could really see this working for anything involving Line Rider. Maybe we'll get a more fulfilled reincarnation of something like the Retrograde track someday. A man can dream. Anton's latest showing is a lot to dig into, so let's dig into it. I'm So Tired it's a rather depressing track, and the accompanying reasons as to why Anton made it are just as much.
I feel disconnected from other people and other Line Rider creators in particular. I used to make Quirk, which culminated in the Line Rider calculator, but I was unable to communicate the intricacies of my design. That was the loneliest I have felt. My old Line Rider friends quit and I find it difficult to relate to those who now make Quirk. And I seem to have no place with LRAC, for they share a language I do not speak. It feels like I've fallen into a crack of the larger Line Rider community.
This lengthy bio goes on to explain specific parts of the track as well as the emotions they convey, and to Anton's credit, there's a lot of compelling moments. Bosch immediately crashing the second he tries transitioning from one line to another is a remarkable way to translate emotions of burnout for Line Rider in particular. So is Bosch bouncing on each piano beat by the means of super long off-sled gravity wells. Like, I can hear Anton saying, "Fine, you want this to sink? Here, happy now?" In that regard, the section inspired by Doodle Chaos is not only a transformative take on one of Doodle Chaos's signature decorations, but also a good way to relieve any underlying antagonism that might have plagued this track otherwise. Anton, like myself, clearly admires the people who are pushing Line Rider to newer heights. The problem is nothing more than just feeling left out, and, funnily enough, when comparing this to Surrender, I think we can realize why these feelings are surfacing. It seems as though Anton used to fit in very well back when the community was much different, until the older way of doing things became obsolete. Surrender, as Sheldon put it, captured the ego death of Line Rider. I'm So Tired captures the aftermath. And it makes sense. The biggest thing that looms over gamified communities in general is the illusion of a limit. Back then, being technically proficient enough was a goal, and if you achieved that goal, you'd be the best track maker who'd get the most connections with other people. Everyone would look up to you because you've won the game, I mean you've made good tracks. Art doesn't work like that. Art is a continuous conversation that finds reward in the act of symbolic communication. There is no best, there is no limit. When a community experiences that drastic of a shift, it's only natural some people would feel left out. It's sad, but in an internal way. Thus, I guess if there's anything I could say, it's that, well, look at everything else here. Every track in this video is distinct from one another in some way, including this one, and creative frustrations aside, there will always be someone willing to be friends with you, as long as you're not a piece of shit. So don't feel left out. I may not have the full context to your situation, but the last thing I want is for this community to feel closed off to anyone for not fitting in. That's the reason I'm encouraging you, and hopefully other people will feel encouraged by this too. Anton, you've made lovely art. Stop being so sad!
Stop.
Okay, let's end this thing off with Gavinru's recent track. Gavinru is a track maker who has cultivated and refined a style entirely of his own. Usually he'll apply his style to 21 Pilots or Coldplay songs, but in this case we have the first time I've seen him take a stab at 90s grunge rock. I bring this up because Gavinru's style, as it turns out, ends up being such a perfect fit for that genre to the point where I'm surprised he hasn't thought of connecting the two sooner. Both Gavinru and a lot of rock artists from the 90s tackle an otherwise standard genre of their respective mediums in a messy and unorthodox way, which is why, just like how Where's My Mind is one of the greatest songs of its genre, Gavinru's take on it is one of his greatest tracks, period. Everything about this track is messy in the best of ways, from the different line widths that visually clash with each other to the way the lines are drawn in a scribbly manner. It works because as amateur as it might look, the structure is tightly controlled and thus easy to subvert. There's a scene part where the singer starts rambling about fish. Well-known Line Rider motifs are recontextualized through Gavin's methodology, and my favorite part is when Bosch goes off sled when the camera is really far away and the focus is drawn towards the lyrics, meaning when the camera zooms back in, the viewer is shocked to find Bosch without a sled. If that wasn't enough, the track makes no mention of this at first, which doesn't feel out of place because of the tone this track is set up, so when Gavin Roos starts drawing attention to it with Bosch questioning where his sled is, it's poignant. Speculatively, it feels like criticism of how willing we are to accept chaos and injustices, with the song acting as a window into why. But concretely, definitely one of the best uses of LRA's camera I've ever seen. Nevertheless, I think tracks like this and Bring Down the House are signs of track makers starting to not only question how to kinesthetically sync to a song, but also bring out a lot of the cultural and emotional context that may be associated with a given song. It makes sense, as Line Rider has been coming into its own as an art medium these past 2 years. Why not use the language this community has nurtured? This is why I was a bit hard on One Eyed Giant 2. I don't hate that track by any means. You'd be hard pressed to find me saying I hate a Line Rider track. But I prefer my tracks to be more thoughtful in what they put forward, and Where's My Mind scratches that itch perfectly for me. It's a stellar track from a stellar track maker, but with that out of the way, there is one question I must ask myself. At this part, where did the sled go? Whew, that was quite the ride. Let me know what you think of this approach for making these videos, and if you liked what you saw, check out the Line Rider Discord, which will be linked in the description. Additionally, if you want to follow another series just like this, check out Rabbit Squirrel's Monthly Roundup, which will also be linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and see you next week. I'm eMonth.